Hi, I'm Chairman Don Palmer with the United States Election Assistance Commission. To continue the EAC celebration of Native American Heritage Month, I'm joined by Gail Fenumiai and Samantha Mack, both with the Alaska Division of Elections. Gail has over 20 years of experience working for the division and has worked in a variety of positions and started her second tenure as director in January of 2019. Samantha Mack is a language assistance compliance manager for the Alaska Division of Elections. She's worked directly in elections for 18 months, but has worked and studied in the field of American Native policy and tribal sovereignty for over a decade. Thank you both for joining me today, recognizing Native American Heritage Month, particularly with the change in time zones. We're both here at the same time, and thank you for joining me today. I want to give our viewers a little opportunity to hear about your background. So please tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started in elections, particularly elections in Alaska. And I'll let you go first, and then we'll go to Samantha.
Okay, thanks for having us here today, Commissioner. We really are excited to celebrate this with you and talk a little bit about how Alaska manages our language program for Alaska Native voters. So I started out with the division. I transferred into the division from the Lieutenant Governor's office in the late 80s. I know that kind of tells you maybe what my age is, but and I started out as election coordinator, and I just really loved the work. And then I took some time off to be with my kids, and then I came back and, as mentioned earlier, served in a variety of positions. And I think elections is the type of work that you either develop a real passion for and you just love it, or it's just a job. And I have great passion for the work we do, and I just really I'm grateful to be here, and I work with a great group of people. And so that's a little bit about me.
How about you, Samantha? How did you get, tell me a little bit about yourself in elections.
Yeah, of course. So hi, I'm Samantha Mack. I'm from King Cove, Alaska. I'm a member of the Abdago tribe there. I come from actually a background in academia and only sort of recently absconded from that career trajectory to work more directly with language assistance. But before I came here, I spent my time really researching tribal sovereignty, especially as it pertains to the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, to political participation of Indigenous folks, as well as food sovereignty rights. So I transitioned into the division in days before the primary in 2020. So it's kind of all been like a whirlwind since then, but it's been really spectacular to be a part of the work that the division is doing here.
So Alaska, when we started talking about this at the commission, Alaska has such a large population of Native Americans and living in the far reaches of the state and very hard to access. And so that being said, tell me about the team at the Alaska Division of Elections and how they serve and how you see serving the Native American community.
Well,
Sure. So we have,
just jump in, yeah.
I'll start, and then Sam can join in. We have two full-time dedicated staff people who manage our language program, and that is Sam and Davina. And I think an added bonus for us is they both are Alaska Native women who have a very strong passion for this, and they just do an outstanding job for the division. The division statewide only has 28 employees. And so we manage over 500,000 registered voters and conduct all state and federal elections. We are divided into regions. And so our supervisors in our Region 3 Fairbanks office and our Region 4 Nome office work with the communities regularly to help help get the language assistance program into full use. We use translation panels. Sam can expand a little bit about this, but we currently have 9 people on our UPIC panel and a 3-person Gwich'in panel. Some who are well-known and respected elders in this state, and they help us with the very many documents and forms and videos and PSAs that need to get translated in order to get the message out to all voters. We also incorporate the use of bilingual outreach workers, and I'll let Sam talk a little bit more about that. We strive to find those in all of our covered communities, and they help us with a lot of pre-election activities, from voter registration through helping people translate, read to them, explain to them the official election pamphlet. And then we rely a lot on bilingual poll workers. So again, we strive, and I use that word strive because we really do try to have a bilingual poll worker, at least one in every precinct that the need exists. And Sam, if you want to go ahead and expand.
Yeah, I think in terms of that latter half of your question, how do these folks serve our Native voters? The translation panels in particular really are a fantastic and beautiful model, and it's not a model that folks who do translation around the rest of the US always employ for Indigenous languages, but it's something that's sort of extremely important to us, and it's also required. So that's great. But basically, it just sort of ensures that there are multiple people working together to sort of cross-check the translations for all of our content, and that becomes extraordinarily important when you have situations where maybe the legal terminology in the English language doesn't exist yet in Bristol Bay Yupik or some other Yupik language. And so that can be really challenging when you have just one person who's trying to then come up with an entirely new word that's then going to be disseminated across Alaska, in that language. And so the translation panel model really allows us to have a collaborative model of work. And I know our translators appreciate that. It also just sort of allows for a higher caliber of translation that really is more applicable and culturally appropriate for all kinds of folks.
So it's interesting, some of our listeners may not know what we're talking about when we talk about a panel. I have seen and heard of, differences on a translated word, for example. And so just to clarify, these are sort of a panel of experts in translation, and there may be differences of opinion. So this panel, will they recommend, they'll recommend a final terminology or translation for a particular election term. Is that sort of how it works for our listeners?
Yeah, that's correct. That's pretty much exactly how it goes. And so as Gail mentioned, our panel not only consists of like bilingual experts in the language, but also of elders in the language. And so the elders are typically who we confer with if there is any sort of disagreement as to whether or not a particular word is the best use or is the most appropriate one in a circumstance. And so that really is a phenomenal resource that we're able to utilize.
Yeah, because Sam hit something that really important, is that there is not a word for word translation from the English words, not necessarily even just election related words, into Alaska Native languages. And so that's an extreme challenge that we face. And the panel method is a great way to help us find those words.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I'm sure you feel this way. I'm very thankful for the people that agree to participate on these panels, because I've seen examples where it's very difficult to find people who are willing to do so. And so, as a director of elections or an expert in this, you have to make the final decision. It's very helpful to have other input, to let them make the decision, so you don't have to sometimes make the hard decision where I'm not an expert in a language like this. Is that something that you guys have taken years to cultivate, those relationships with those panels, and how has that worked for the benefit of the voters?
Sam, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So the current panel members were actually recommended to us as a part of the Toyapuk settlement in the mid 2010s. And so we have worked to maintain a good relationship with those panel members. We still utilize the same panel members if they're willing to work with us. We have brought on, I think, at least 1 or 2 new panel members over the last 5 to 6 years. But that relationship is extremely extremely important for us to maintain. Like you said, it's really difficult work, and also that kind of collaborative effort is can be really exhausting. And with COVID, having to do so much stuff over distance adds a whole new layer of challenge. And so we're really grateful for the efforts of the folks that are involved.
Well, and I think we're very fortunate that the translation panel members, they take their job very seriously.
Yes.
I mean, they understand what's at stake here, and they take their time and they do a very thorough job, and we couldn't do what we need to do without them.
Yes. So let's just step back just a little bit. Tell me a little bit about, I was fascinated, and I don't have a rich history or knowledge of all the different tribes, but I was fascinated by just the number of different tribes and sort of the geographic range of it. Samantha, you want to just tell us a little bit about the different tribes? And I think our listeners would be fascinated on just the breadth of it in Alaska. And, so I'm gonna give you a chance to just talk about that, because it's not just the voter. I mean, it is the voters we're serving, but it's the larger community that we're and participating with. So I'm gonna give you a chance to talk a little bit about that.
Thank you. That's an amazing question. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to talk about this, because not a lot of people actually realize that, out of over 500 federally recognized tribes in the United States, and that's only the federally recognized tribes, nothing to be said about the massive amount of other tribes who don't have federal recognition. But out of the over 500 federally recognized tribes, we have half of that in Alaska, which is insane. That's a really large number of people. And, I think folks from the lower 48 have, an understanding. There's, Yupik, Inupiaq, Athabascan, Tlingit, Haida, Tsimshian, Ali, Alutiiq, and, maybe that's kind of all they know, if they know that, which is completely understandable. But also that's really just scratching the surface of what it is. And so, we have the regional corporations, and that's kind of how things are divided in terms of like politically, maybe. But also, there are language umbrellas. And so that's something that we had to contend with Section 203 when we were required to provide assistance in Inupiaq, Yupik, and Athabascan. But those are really kind of generic language umbrellas with no real specificity. So then it comes down to us to determine, well, how do we enact that in a way that's actually productive and fills the needs of voters who require that kind of language assistance. Yeah, it's a really interesting situation. We are the only state, as far as I know, that has a vast majority of those communities off the road system, which presents a whole new slew of challenges in terms of elections, as well as, a lot of other things, even in terms of like communicativity.
And when you say off the road, I mean, it's literally off the road. The only way to reach them is like through the air or through a ship of some sort. And it's not like you can drive there. I mean, I don't think a lot of people understand that. And, so I just want to make sure that's clear. So you talked a little bit about all the different potential tribes. So let's get a little granular. We're here about serving the community on the language requirements and the translation and the recruitment of poll workers. Take us through how a step-by-step, perhaps you would start that process of making sure the translation and the recruitment of poll workers is there. So on election day, they literally would have those services when they're not road access, So talk to me about, and talk to our listeners about how you serve those communities literally on the ground.
Well, that's a big challenge. Like you said, not being on the road is a huge challenge because you can't reach all these people personally. And so our regional supervisors start recruiting poll workers starting in like March and April of an election year. Our first state election in even years is in August. So we start our recruitment, because on top of us trying to employ the workers in these areas, they have a lot of other activities in their lives that are very important to them, subsistence. So in the summertime, they're busy fishing and berry picking. And then in the winter, they have hunting and other activities. So we have to try to coordinate our schedules with them, and obviously being cognizant that these other parts of their lifestyle are very, 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 very crucial. So anyway, we start the recruitments in like March and April. We struggle, not just in the areas where language is required, but in all parts of the states to find workers anymore. We incentivized them a little bit last year by being able to give them some extra pay that the state approved. And then when COVID hit, we were able to pay a little bit more with some due to COVID. We provide training for them. We fly them into hub locations and give them training so they understand the election procedures and how to set up their equipment and what different posters need to be displayed and the processes of checking in a voter, what voters vote question ballots. We have a large amount of, recruitment materials that are already translated. We use social media to try to reach out to the communities that we struggle with. So the recruitment process is I think it's a little more difficult in these areas just because they have so much else going on in their lives that they can't just stop from doing. And, so it's difficult, but we also do rely on the tribes to try to help us get us names of workers. So Sam, anything else?
Yeah, I mean, the relationship with tribal organizations is really key here because especially in those precincts where we do require language assistance, they're really best positioned to know who's going to be qualified to provide that, who is recognized as somebody who is proficient in English as well as the, native language. And so that is a really kind of indispensable resource, maintaining a line of communication with them, in terms of making sure that folks have the resources that they need on election day. We also do a lot of outreach before the election even begins, purely in terms of language assistance as well. We have translated PSAs, the election is on this day, you can use this ID, you can, it's open from this time to this time at this location, you're allowed language assistance, all of these PSAs that kind of go through what's going on that are aired over local radio stations in the native language. And so that's kind of one way that we get around the issue of, broadband access, which is also something that is a ongoing problem in our state because most if not all of our materials are available online on our website. And so, folks in urban areas can pretty easily access them, but it becomes a little bit more challenging when you have folks who don't have reliable internet access, or they do, it's just extremely expensive. Then how can we make sure that we get those materials to them?
So, I've been in the elections for a while, and I also worked at the Department of Justice, but you hear a lot of good things about, maybe it's because of the big challenge, and then you just hear a lot of good things about Alaska, the Division of Elections, and how they serve their voters, and as a model for other states. Could you talk a little bit about the successes as you see it? What has worked for you, and what do you see your success? And frankly, what it all comes down to is, is there satisfaction from the tribes that the process is working, and do they seem engaged and satisfied with those services? And so, and it's a kind of a multi-pronged question, but just talk a little bit about your successes, what you see as the successes, and the satisfaction level of the voters.
That's a really big question.
Hey.
One of the things that is really important to us that's been incredibly exciting is that we're able to disseminate translated OEPs, an OEP official election pamphlet. This is over 100 pages of material, candidate profiles, maps, just informational pieces about this is how your vote is counted. This is what we do with the ballots, X, Y, and Z. The fact that we're able to translate those into our languages, in a physical booklet that exists in hand, and then send those to the tribes for the tribal offices, to give those to the folks who need them. that is incredible. I think that is a really wonderful success that we've had in the last few years. You know, the OEP in itself doesn't just exist as a resource for voters, it's also a tool for language learners. It's also a tool for language revitalization. So it's not just about elections, it's about, you know, the existence of these languages and these cultures and peoples. And so that's really fantastic. You know, one thing that's also been really great is the use of multimodality, you know, using multiple modes of communication to get this information to our voters, to folks all around the state, you know, not just having, you know, written PSAs or written posters posted in places, but also having the, you know, presence of audio, sending audio to folks to, you know, read out over the VHF or play over, you know, the local VHF, as well as the radio stations. You know, we've broadcast videos over local television stations as well. And so kind of trying to access all of those modes allows us to reach voters in a way that, you know, not just using one of those things will. And it also allows us to reach voters who maybe speak better than they read, or vice versa, which is extremely important. Goodness, I think one thing that we're especially proud of, you know, is the increased involvement, as Gail said, of multilingual and of Alaska Native folks in the actual process of enacting language assistance in the state. You know, who better to figure out how this program can be the most effective than the people it's actually helping. And so we engage with our panel for more than just translation work. You know, we ask them, you know, right now we're thinking of whether or not it makes more sense to have all of the Yupik language glossaries together in one glossary or separated out into individual glossaries, you know, and so we can ask them what's going to be the most useful for you, what's the most useful for actual voters. And then it's just people who's using them, not just me, who's the one laying it all out in a word processor. You know, we consult with them on the layout of sample ballots. How can we make this look readable and still functional for our LEP, limited English proficiency voters in this language? And that's something that's an ongoing challenge. That was a lot of words.
No, that's great.
Another thing that I think Sam mentioned just briefly that she should be really proud of is the fact that we have developed audio and written glossaries in Alaska Native languages, and they're online and they're available in hard copy. And I think they're very crucial to this whole thing, to this whole, it's just, they're very important, and they get updated as terminology gets updated. In fact, now we're working on them to incorporate language with our top 4 primary and ranked choice voting. So that, if you talk about challenges, that's a huge challenge to try to get that information interpreted in translated into a manner that's still going to make sense. So that's a big hill we're climbing this year.
Well, that's fascinating. I want to thank you for joining me today. I mean, I think that the language assistance that you provide is really an integral part of maintaining the heritage of the Native Americans in Alaska. And I think you would probably agree with me on that. And so I think that the work that you're doing is awesome. I want to thank both Gail Fenumiai and Samantha Mack, both for joining me. They both with the Alaska Division of Elections. Thank you for giving me your time to talk a little bit about the services that you provide to the Native American community and recognizing Native American Heritage Month. Thank
you, Commissioner. Take care.
Take care. Be safe.